All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Roundtable Rundown Show. My name is Joey Mistretta. Today, I will be running the podcast solo, talking a little baseball, and I think it'll be an interesting podcast today. We got some Reds talking some Angels, Mets, and Royals, and we'll go ahead and begin with the Cincinnati Reds. So the Reds, they've had a pretty busy offseason. They've also been linked, though, to guys like Kyle Schwarber, and they were unable to sign him, of course. But they recently acquired a couple of guys who left Reds Twitter a little frustrated, and I'll get into that in a second. But let's start with who they acquired. So they signed J.J. Bleday to a deal, and they brought in Dane Myers via trade. Now, these guys are both outfielders, and these are solid players. They're not superstars, but Bleday, he can really hit right-handed pitching well. He could be a good platoon guy. Myers, he'll probably be a platoon depth guy. He could start. He's had some good moments. He's not a star either, though. The thing about it is Reds Twitter, they entered the Reds entered offseason with pretty high expectations, and they haven't really done a whole lot. Now, the rotation, it's exciting. The rotation's really exciting. You know, you got Hunter Green, you got Nick Lodolo, you got these young guys with high ceilings, and the bullpen could be interesting as well. But you look at the lineup just really doesn't offer a whole lot. And Bleday and Myers, it left Reds Twitter, and I know it's X now, but I think Reds Twitter is okay to say. We'll just say it left Reds fans wondering if this is all they're going to do. Like, is Bleday and Myers, are those the guys they're going to sign? And that's it. And their president of baseball operations, Nick Kroll, recently spoke to reporters, and he was kind of asked about that. He was asked if this is all it's going to be for the Reds. And he kind of hinted that more moves could be in the future. Does that mean they sign a star? Does that mean they bring in another J.J. Bleday kind of guy where it's like, okay, good addition, not anything to write home about, but could be a good depth move. And I think what's important to note is depth moves, they are important. Like, you don't want to overlook that. But I think with the Reds where they're at right now and the NL Central being a pretty winnable division, I think you got to go out and sign somebody. And Jim Bowden, a former MLB executive, now he's a baseball analyst, he recently said something similar. He was talking on, I believe it was MLB Sirius XM radio, and he was saying that the Reds should go out and trade for Luis Robert Jr. And he didn't just come up with that. Like, they've been linked to Robert now for a while. And the White Sox, I think they are open to trading him. I mean, if you ask them, they might say no. But I think you look at the White Sox situation, and they will be a little better, but they're still a long ways away from contending, even in a fairly winnable AL Central. Whereas the NL Central, it's winnable. I mean, we can go through the division. The Pittsburgh Pirates, they're not going to compete anytime soon. I wish they would. I love Paul Skeens, but the fact is they're not. The Cubs and Brewers, those are the teams to beat. And neither of those teams are juggernauts. They're not in the same division as the Dodgers or the Phillies. So I'm looking at those teams like, if I'm the Reds, my rotation can potentially not necessarily be better than them, but catch up with those teams. But offensively, that's where the question mark comes. And that's where a guy like Luis Robert Jr. could be such a good addition. And I also think they should go out and bring in another veteran or two, like a Nick Castellanos. Castellanos, I think bringing him back would be great. I know Castellanos hasn't been the same player for the Phillies, but it seems like he's almost guaranteed to be traded at this point. I mean, the Phillies went out and they got Adolis Garcia. So if you go out and get Nick Castellanos and you bring in Luis Robert Jr., that increases both your star power and your veteran prowess. And those are two things that good teams have. You know, you need stars, you need veterans. And right now, the offense, Elly De La Cruz is your guy. But you look at the rest of the lineup, and there's just a lot of uncertainty. So if I'm the Reds right now, I'm picking up my phone, I'm calling the White Sox saying, hey, what will a Luis Robert Jr. require, or a Luis Robert Jr. trade require? You know, how can we make this happen? Because and the other team, by the way, going back to what I was saying about the NL Central, the other team I didn't mention, the Cardinals, they're rebuilding. You know, they traded Sonny Gray. They're probably going to trade Nolan Arenado. Brendan Donovan's a trade candidate. Like, they're not trying to win. They traded Wilson Contreras. So I just look at this NL Central. If I'm the Reds, right now is the time. Like, maybe the Reds timeline, they were thinking it was going to be, another year or two. But right now, they could realistically win the division. And you might say, well, the Brewers are still pretty good. Yeah, sure, but the Brewers don't really have a whole lot of star power either. I mean, Freddie Peralta, he's been mentioned in a bunch of trade rumors. Christian Yelich hasn't been the same player he once was. I mean, the Brewers, they don't really scare me. And every year, I think all the experts get in trouble because they say things like that. The Brewers don't scare them. And then the Brewers go and win 95 games with a bunch of guys you've never heard of because they're the Brewers. And you look at Yelich's numbers, and he's not anywhere near where he was when he was an MVP candidate back in 2018, 2019. But they're one of those small market teams like the Guardians, teams like that just find ways to win. But I still think that if you're the Reds, you could compete because your rotation could be so good that if you go out and get those 2 or 3 extra bats, your offense can do enough. The pitching will take care of the rest. So looking at the Reds, if I'm the Reds, I'm 100% saying, okay, let's go make this deal and see what happens. So those are my thoughts on the Reds. Now transitioning over to the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels have been a very, very interesting team to follow this offseason. They're making some moves. They're bringing in some bullpen guys. Today they agreed to a contract with Kirby Yates. They're making moves like that. They have yet to really make that huge star power move, though. And I think it was Ken Rosenthal. If I'm mistaken, my bad. But I think it was Ken Rosenthal, maybe Will Salmon, maybe both of them. In an article for The Athletic, they mentioned that Nolan Arenado was a potential trade candidate. Speaking of the Cardinals, who I just mentioned, Nolan Arenado was a potential trade candidate for the Angels. However, that wasn't going to happen until their Anthony Rendon situation was figured out. Well, today, and I'm recording this this will be published on Tuesday, December 30th, the Angels and Rendon agreed to a contract restructure. So if you remember, Rendon signed his big 7-year, $245 million deal back in 2020, and it didn't go according to plan. He had one decent season. He finished 10th in MVP voting in 2020, which was the shortened year because of the pandemic. I think he, like I said, finished in 10th in MVP voting. He was fresh off that 2019 just incredible campaign with the Nationals. He was the big free agent, landed in Anaheim. The Angels were hoping to snap their playoff drought, and it just didn't happen. They still haven't won the playoffs since they still haven't made the playoffs since 2014, and it's been more than 10 years now. Shohei Ohtani's on the Dodgers now. Albert Pujols is retired. Mike Trout's not the same player he was. So that team that they assembled for 2020 and beyond, it just didn't work. And Rendon was a big culprit behind that. And it was injuries, it was underperformance, there was reports, or not really reports, more opinions that just made it seem like he didn't want to be there. And only he knows how he truly felt. But there was that quote he made in 2024, which was essentially, he essentially said, it's just a job. And he said it's not his top priority. And in all fairness to him, like, for him to say that, he's valuing faith and family above baseball, for him to say that, that's completely justified. I think that's great. But he also just said that it wasn't his biggest priority. It wasn't a top priority. It's just a job. And when he goes and says something like that, and you're missing so many games, I believe the most games he's played, or he played in an Angels uniform, was 58. You signed a $245 million deal, and the most games you play in a season is 58. And you make comments saying that this isn't your top priority, yeah, that's going to piss off a lot of people. It's going to frustrate not just the Angels fans, but MLB fans. Look, I'm not an Angels fan, but I grew up in SoCal, and I like the Angels. And when I heard him say that, it was just like, okay, like the faith and family thing, for sure. Everyone says that. The great players say that, The ones who, it's all about family. But when you're also adding the top, it's not a top priority, you're saying it's just a job. It's not just a job. Being a professional baseball player, it's not. It is a gig, but the guy who's going to his 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that's just a job. When you're a pro baseball player, you've been working your whole life to get to this spot. Like, you probably started playing baseball when you're like 4 or 5 years old. And when you go out and say that, to me, again, I don't know how he felt. To me, it just made it seem like he didn't love what he was doing anymore. And to be fair, there's probably a lot of frustration because he's been dealing with the injuries. So I understand it. I really do. But he had the altercations as well. He had the thing with Jesse Winker of the Mariners where Winker was hit by a pitch. This was in, I think, 2022. And Rendon had just undergone surgery on his wrist. And with the other hand, he struck Winker in the face. And this was a whole altercation. And then, of course, there's the 2023 thing with the A's, the Had 'em weren't here, in Oakland, when they were still in Oakland. And he had an incident with a fan. He grabbed him by the shirt and said something. I guess the fan was heckling him. And unfortunately, those incidents will probably be what he's remembered for the most. And those are lowlights. I'm trying to think, what else is Rendon going to be remembered for in Anaheim? In Washington, different story. Wins the World Series, awesome. He had a pretty good reputation there. The only reason they'd be mad with him is because he left in free agency. But in Anaheim, what else is he going to be remembered for? I guess he hit that left-handed home run. He's a right-handed hitter, and he hit a left-handed home run. I think a pitcher or a position player was pitching. That was pretty cool. But that's about it. Other than that, it's pretty much all negative. And I feel for him. I mean, he seems like I don't know him. Seems like a nice enough dude. And he's been through a lot for these 5 or 6 years. And I guarantee you, whether he still loves baseball or not, his plan wasn't to go and get injured. His plan wasn't to go and miss time with injury. He still, I'm sure, still wanted to be out there, at least early in his career. Or early in his Angels tenure. So it's a really difficult situation. It almost reminds me of guys like Joel Embiid or even Anthony Davis in the NBA. These guys who are exceptional players, but the injuries just kind of, not decimate their careers because those guys are still in the NBA. But I think there's an unfair narrative that comes that suggests that they don't want to be out there. And you got to remember, injuries are real. For us, we see the injury report and it's player is out with ankle injury or Anthony Rendon's out with whatever injury he's dealing with. And we just see the report, but we don't always remember that these guys are really going through the pain of dealing with it. I film this podcast, I go and stub my toe walking out of my room here. I'd be in pain. That would suck. I would be in pain. And that's stubbing my toe. These guys, they're trying to go out and play in front of 30,000, 40,000 fans dealing with shoulder injuries and leg injuries. And baseball, it's usually elbow and arm stuff. And, it's just, I do understand that. But with Rendon, I just think the comments he made, the incidents that happened, it's just a very unfortunate tenure he had in Anaheim. And I just think, it will be remembered as one of the worst contracts in all of sports. And that's just the fact. And even without those incidents he had, it still would have been a really bad contract. And for me personally, I'm not just saying this now because I'm looking back. I always thought that signing him was a weird move for the Angels. They realistically already had enough offense to compete. It's always been pitching. And they were linked to Garrett Cole that offseason, and Cole obviously signed with the Yankees. Fine. You couldn't sign Garrett Cole. I would have gone out and signed 3 or 4 other quality starting pitchers as opposed to giving Rendon $245 million. And I know it's easy to say that now, looking back, but that's just my opinion. Even back then, I don't know if I have any proof, but even back then, I remember saying that. The Angels should have gone out and signed a few starting pitchers, give your rotation some depth. The Rendon deal never really made sense to me, and it ended up not working out. And today, as Sam Blum reported of the, he was a reporter for the Angels. He said Rendon's 10 years over. This contract restructure, he's not going to play another game in Angels uniform, and it's probably for the best. I don't know if he's going to retire. I think he still might try to play somewhere else. I have no idea. But with the Angels, his time in Anaheim, it's over. Moving on now to the New York Mets, and what an offseason it's been for them, and that's not a good thing. They have made a lot of questionable decisions, and they're looking for a way to salvage their offseason. Now you look at the Mets, what have they done so far, right? They brought in some bullpen help. You go and get a guy like Devin Williams. That's a good move. But they've lost Pete Alonso in free agency. They traded Brandon Nimmo, and they traded Jeff McNeil. Those three guys, they were all kind of fan favorites. I mean, for the most part. But then there's all these reports coming out that McNeil and Francisco Lindor didn't get along. Apparently, Nimmo and Lindor didn't get along. And there was a report with them, it was about politics or something, which who knows if that's true. If it was about politics and they traded Nimmo because of that, which again, don't know if that's anywhere near true. So don't clip that and say, oh, he said this. No, I have no idea. That's just a report. But if they traded him because Lindor and him weren't getting along, that's so unfortunate. So unfortunate because Nimmo, really good player, and you trade him for Marcus Semien. Semien's a fine player as well. But I just think, Nimmo was kind of a fan favorite, and so was McNeil. And Pete Alonso, of course. Pete Alonso, 100%. Now, in fairness, for the Alonso thing, he left in free agency. And I don't know if he would have re-signed. Maybe he would have if they would have gave him a lot more money. But Alonso's in Baltimore now. So anyway, we can look back on the Mets and talk about all the reports of the drama and stuff. But let's look to the future. What should they do next? And in a lot of ways, Cody Bellinger just makes so much sense for them. Like, they need outfield help. They lost Nimmo. They could use more speed on the base pass. And Bellinger, he can run a little bit. They need that good defense. And they need a good left-handed hitter. That's what Cody Bellinger is. And he's played in the big market. Like, some guys you have to worry about, bringing in from a small market. Cody began his career in LA. He's played in Chicago. He's played in New York with the Yankees. He knows what it takes to find success in the big market. So playing in the Mets it would actually feel like almost, this is going to be kind of disrespectful to them, but almost like a downgrade market-wise from the Yankees and the Dodgers. And the Mets is still a big market, so he'd handle that fine. Belly, he's still around in free agency, which is kind of crazy. I kind of thought he was going to sign quick, but he's waiting on Kyle Tucker, and Tucker hasn't signed yet. So if I'm the Mets, I'm not even thinking about Kyle Tucker. Tucker's a great player, but let the Yankees go and overpay him. Because to get Tucker right now, you're going to have to overpay. That's just the fact. If I'm the if I'm the Mets, I'm going to Cody Bellinger, and I'm saying, hey, you want 6 years? We'll give you 6 years. You want 7 years? We'll give you 7 years. Why not? You're the Mets. You can spend the money. And I know they're paying Juan Soto a crap load of money. I get it. Steve Cohen's still the owner. They can afford Belly. I know they can. If you have that lineup with Soto, Lindor, and Bellinger, oh boy, you're back. You're back. And could they use another pitcher or two? Absolutely. But I think if I'm the Mets, I'm trying to sign Bellinger. Now, if you can't sign Bellinger, you still have to go get somebody, in my opinion. And I was watching a show yesterday. I think it was John Boy Media affiliates, not talking baseball, but Baseball Today with Chris Rose. And he was saying Stephen Kwan would make a lot of sense for the Mets. And I think that's a great idea. He might have mentioned Bellinger as well, but I think a lot of people have mentioned Bellinger. But Kwan is with the Cleveland Guardians right now, and I think he's under team control through next year, so through 2027. So Cleveland doesn't have to trade him right now. But if we know the Guardians, they're a small market team, they're probably going to end up trading him. I know they extended Jose Ramirez, but he took a pay cut to stay in Cleveland. So unless Kwan's willing to do that, he's going to get traded. And the Mets make so much sense. They need a guy who doesn't strike out a lot. Stephen Kwan never strikes out. A guy who gets on base. Stephen Kwan, Mr. OBP. Great defender. We're talking about Bellinger with the defense. Kwan, maybe even better right now. He's a multi-time Gold Glove winner. He's a multi-time All-Star. And you wouldn't have to pay him as much as Bellinger. And if you trade him, the Guardians will want a big haul for him. But, I think if you give them 3 or 4 prospects. 2 of those guys are star prospects. You can make it work. Maybe you throw in a position player, or a big league player, and already a guy with big league experience already. But I think you could make it work if you really wanted to. So that'd be my plan, is try to sign Bellinger. If you can't do that, go and trade for Kwan. Heck, get both guys. Like, the Mets, they need the help right now. And again, I do think they need another starting pitcher or 2. But just loading up on offense isn't a terrible idea. I mean, you already have Soto and Lindor. And the last point I wanted to make with the Mets is there's kind of a common denominator. Going back to all the drama and stuff, right? McNeil had a problem with a Mets player, apparently. Nimmo had a problem with a Mets player, apparently. There's also rumors of Juan Soto and a certain Mets player having some drama. Maybe not getting along. Who's that player? Francisco Lindor. Now, I don't know what's going on in the locker room. It's tough for all of us who aren't in the locker room. It's tough to say this is what's happening because we don't know what's happening, right? There's people in our lives who maybe bother us, but we still are fine with them. And there's people we genuinely don't like. The McNeil and Soto stuff, that's been talked about for a long time, for being honest. The Lindor, or did I say McNeil Lindor? Hopefully I did. Anyway, I meant McNeil Lindor stuff. That's been talked about for a while. Lindor and Nimmo, that's a little newer. Soto and Lindor, was kind of mentioned throughout last year. If there actually is drama there, and there actually are problems with Lindor and those players, which again is all allegedly, I don't know how they all feel about him, that would say that Lindor, there could be a problem there. Like what is it about Lindor? Mr. Smile, the guy everyone likes. What is it about him that these other star players don't like? And you have to imagine, like, all these reports aren't just coming out of thin air. There's got to be something that sparked these reports. Like, even if they're not completely true, there's got to be something behind them. So what is it, Lindor? Like, he got paid, he was in a small market in Cleveland. Didn't really have any reports like this that I know of. I think. There might have been something with Jason Kipnis. I don't remember. Maybe not. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one. But anyway, in Cleveland for the most part, I don't think there was really any drama that I know of. Then he gets to New York, and all these reports come out that he's not getting along with the other stars on the team. That's not good. Like, when there's multiple reports about your star player not getting along with other stars, that's a problem. You don't hear about that with Aaron Judge. You don't hear about that with Shohei or Mookie. Everyone seems to like those guys. So, again, you don't have to love everybody, like your teammates. You don't have to be your best friends, but there should be respect. And when there becomes that drama and that tension, that's when team chemistry just falls. So hopefully Lindor and the Mets figure that out, because he's a heck of a player, and they need Lindor to be a leader, and they need him to be the guy who welcomes the stars in and leads them. So you don't need that drama. Anyway, that moves on to my last subject I wanted to discuss, and that is the Kansas City Royals' Jack Caglianone. Now, if you don't know who he is, he was a guy who was promoted last season, made his debut, features a lot of power, and there was a recent article published by MLB.com, and I think they asked all of their beat writers to discuss a guy who could break out in 2026. And the Royals MLB.com beat writer is Ann Rogers, and she wrote about Caglianone, and she just said that she thinks he's going to get a chance to play this season, or he's going to get a chance to prove or to compete for a everyday spot on the big league team in spring training. He features a lot of power. For him, it's just all about consistency, right? Can he get on base enough to, and I wrote something about this today, can he get on base enough to cause havoc for opposing pitchers? Can he hit the baseball enough to not just hit home runs, but hit singles, hit doubles, and put the ball in play? Or is he going to strike out a lot? He had a really, really difficult rookie season. He played, I think, just over 60 games. If this guy, because his power is elite, could be elite, if this guy figures it out this season, my goodness, the Royals offense is going to be something. Because you already have Bobby Witt Jr., who's an absolute superstar. if you don't watch Bobby Witt Jr., 'cause he's on the Royals, please watch some Royals games this year. He is so freaking good at baseball. Like he's a stud, man. And maybe it's because I played infield. I love the shortstop, third base guys, but man, this guy, a star shortstop. Watch him play. Michael Garcia, another guy, fun to watch, good defender, good hitter. They just agreed to an extension with him. I think a 5-year deal. That left side of the infield is legit. Talk about Pasquantino, another guy. Like the Royals, their offense could be sneaky good. And if you want to make your sneaky good offense an offense that isn't sneaky anymore and people know about, this Caglione guy, he could be the next star. And I'd love it if they went out and got a Jaron Duran or a Brendan Donovan, because they've been linked to those guys as well. If you add another star and Caglione becomes a star, and they have some other prospect, I can't remember his name right now, who's coming up. He could be good as well. I mean, the Royals, man, like their pitching's pretty deep, and the offense is really good, and they brought in some relievers as well. They're going to be a dangerous team. In the AL Central, it's a pretty winnable division. I mentioned the White Sox earlier. They're not quite ready to compete, but they're even getting better. Cleveland, kind of like the Brewers, like they don't have a lot of offense, but they're still going to find a way to compete probably. But they're not a super dangerous team. The Tigers, they might trade Skubal. If they trade Skubal, that changes the Tigers completely. And the Twins, I don't know what the Twins are doing. Like they were going to trade their stars, then they weren't. Now it looks like they're going to hold on to Buxton and Gray and those guys, but they're not good enough to really, be considered a dangerous team. So if I'm the Royals, I'm looking at this AL Central, and I'm saying, man, we can win. We can win. And if Caglione, who the article, I don't even know if I mentioned this, the article that was written, it was about guys who can break out this season. And Caglione was the guy for the Royals who they think is going to break out. I agree. Give him a chance. Like, this guy, he might not hit for a high average to begin his MLB career, but if you give him everyday at bats, he's going to give you 25, 30 home runs probably, maybe more. And if he figures it out, he might hit 280 with 35 bombs this season. I don't know. This guy can be a stud. So the Royals, they're a team to watch, and I think Jack Caglione is a guy who I'd keep an eye on. I would keep an eye on, to say the least. That about does it, I think. Do I want to talk about anything else? I think we're good. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, it was just me. Josh will probably be back next week. Remember to like and subscribe as we continue to grow the channel. And we will see you next week. Y'all take care.